Hey, welcome to the Dead Web Club podcast. I'm Thomas Volskar. I'm the guy behind the microphone and also creator of the Dead Web Club. Our first guest in our first podcast is designer Roos Groothuizen. The Dead Web podcast is a podcast where we talk to people all inspired by the internet or work on the internet. If you have any questions about the podcast series, you can email at info@deadweb.club. This is the first episode, so apologize for any roughness in the edit. Please come with ideas, thoughts, and I hope you enjoy the show.
My name is Roos Groothuizen. I'm a media artist who cares about digital human rights. I focus on the ethical side of the big data industry and I make game-like installations that try to make invisible problems tangible. I also have an artist collective called Telemagic. We focus on the invisible and noisy side of data and algorithms and how these invisible algorithms produce lots of data. We see poetics in that. And then last but not least, I also have an artist space called Zip. This was founded 3.5 years ago and it's in Rotterdam in the Oude Noorden. And I founded it together with other artists who are working within the themes of digital culture, queer themes, and fringe art forms.
It's like, what's your first memory of being online?
I really love this question. I think for me, my first memory that really made me understand is that the possibilities with the internet are endless is I think I was about 10 or 11 years old and I really liked Pokemon. And I had a classmate that also really likes Pokemon. And together we started building websites. Just by looking at that time, YouTube didn't even exist. So you had these like very strange websites that we just found by Googling something with very bare HTML tutorials and CSS tutorials. And together we tried to make something out of it. My love for coding was already at a very early age because I was making Pokemon fan websites. I had this Neopets account that was a website for children where you could care for magical pets. You could have your own little web shop with your pet supplies on this website, and you could also decorate your web shop through HTML and CSS. So I was already trying to figure out by coding how I could make a cute website with glitters and with music. So I guess that's my first very fond memory.
I have a feeling there's a lot of people who listen to the podcast will also remember like Neopets. Do you feel like then already at that point, because you were doing it with your friends and then you work together and you create this online site and you're building and creating something, would that maybe you feel like that influence kind of where you are now?
Yeah, I guess the internet for me always been a social thing, a social being, because you either like create something with your friends or connect with friends or you find new communities. So also with the Neopets example, I accidentally found it, I think, while looking for Pokemon images. I suddenly saw this like magical animal that wasn't a Pokemon, and then you click and go further and further. This element of serendipity, wonder and adventure and figuring things out with your friends and talking about what you found is something I still do on the internet.
And the internet has changed in many aspects since that time. I mean, maybe a question that pops up for a lot of people at the moment is like how the internet has changed for the worse or for the better, and how you maybe perceive it. How do you feel the internet has changed for you, your relationship to the internet?
I think, has it changed for the worse? It is changing. And I think there's also a bit of nostalgia stuck to it. So maybe it's a biased answer that you think, oh, the internet's getting worse and worse. I do think that big problem is, and that's also what the big writers are writing about, is that when the internet was still this kind of like place of wonder, it was something that everyone was trying to discover, and people were still figuring out how can we make money out of this. And I think the moment that it was figured out how to make money out of it, it changed for the worse. And I think when it comes to finding information, especially how we get information online has changed a lot, and also how we connect online has changed a lot. These things have become very curated, also because it is now curated by these big platforms and social media. I think what I think is interesting is that Mark Zuckerberg, for example, said about 2 months ago that Instagram and Facebook are not social media platforms anymore, but content platforms. The biggest change we've seen is in the last 4 years, maybe since COVID, that the way we use social media is more in a content way nowadays. So we are not really connecting with friends. We are rather using social media to look at memes or videos of strangers cooking or doing pranks on each other.
The question with that is that when there's a lot of people out there that won't like how it's going, I want to fight against it. At least how I see things, that I feel like maybe it's likely that people go a bit like going back to a bit of a finding their own communities again and kind of away from larger social media platforms. It's like the digital version of the underground. Everyone's on Main Street, but you got to find the alleyways of the internet to hang out. How do you see that?
I think there is currently some sort of social media fatigue going on, or maybe it's platform fatigue. Dutch media critic, theorist wrote about this in 2019, had this book called Set by Design. He stated the only way to get people off of these social media, they can have scandal after scandal, but the platforms are kind of designed in a way that they make you feel nihilist. Their entire company strategy is about making you feel nihilist. And that's what people do, is like, oh yeah, they already know everything about me, so why would I care about leaving Instagram or not? Or this kind of like fatigue feeling is like, yeah, but then if I leave, then no one else will follow and I'll lose everything. So that is really an interesting way of looking at it, that is designed by hand to kind of make you feel stuck and sad about it. What Loving said in that book is that these scandals can get worse and worse, but people in the end kind of give a crap, but they, because of this feeling of sadness and nihilism, won't leave. The only way to get them off these platforms is by boredom. This is where the fatigue becomes boredom, and boredom creates action again. I think that is what we're seeing now. These social media platforms are becoming voids, and people are trying to look elsewhere. The people that are mostly interested in the way social media works and involved with it from an ethical point of view are trying to figure out, how can I consume the internet or have a lifestyle on the internet without these gigantic curated machines from people that only care about money. What do you feel, Thomas, when you're on? I know you're on Instagram a lot. How has your feeling changed over the last few years?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram for a lot of friends on Instagram. So it tends to be the place where a lot of people are. It's one of the apps where you can get a hold of people. It tends to also be like Instagram or let's say Facebook. You know, it tend to like always think about gonna delete this, like I don't need this. But then you have also this feeling of like we'll lose contact with friends and family, for example. I always think about, like, for example, Facebook is more like it's not really a ghost town, but it's more like it's like a dying shopping mall where all the coolness that used to be there, it's all gone, and now it's all kind of weird, fringy budget shops. It's kind of a bit of a shell of what used to be there. I used to use Facebook more for a while, like for just events, keeping track of events, because people used to post events there way more than now. It all kind of changed for me around COVID. After COVID, nobody really is posting stuff. It's not really useful for even following events. I know someone that used to organize big major events about gaming. They used to sell a lot of tickets via Facebook. And then after COVID, like, they couldn't really sell anymore. They didn't get much tickets sales through Facebook anymore because they didn't reach anyone. It used to be a place where people would go, and now it's kind of a place you kind of like shocked every time you go in there. like what's really happening there at all.
It's interesting what you're saying about how like these events get drowned and that like big events even can't sell things anymore. And it kind of reminds me of how people are also really fed up with dating apps nowadays because people don't get meaningful matches anymore. It's just about paying the subscription. And I guess it's also the thing with Facebook or with Instagram is if you're not like paying the deluxe amount of ads, that your event gets drowned the whole time. And if you do pay up, it gets repeated endlessly. And so it is not accessible anymore for small local communities or finding meaningful connections. The soul has kind of left because it was always about what made the platform interesting was the interesting connections that were made and the meaningful things that were said by real human beings. Now that gets drowned, there's just a meaningless husk left over.
I read or came across that the downfall of a lot of internet forums is time-wise connected with the move to Facebook groups. This is just a theory I have. It's like put on your aluminum foil hat, but I feel a lot of sites that used to have their own forums, like in bird watching groups, astro, like whatever you wanted. People had a forum, they would hang out, and I think when they came out with Facebook, and suddenly people had real names and identities. That cool person who gave you tips about what camera lens you could buy now has a name and identity and maybe opinions you don't really like. You have this idea in your head, kind of like online dating. You have this idea in your head and then you meet the person and then suddenly it's like, oh, what craziness is this? I know this person suddenly in real life. And maybe that's people online just want to hang out with like-minded people. They don't need to know everything about someone's life.
I like this theory. I think my own theory would be that a lot of people are also looking for convenience. You're already on Facebook, you already have your friends and your family set up, and now you can also find niche information about cameras from people on the same platform. I do think the convenience aspect is a big part of why it's so difficult to get off because all the other options are not convenient. We have Zip here in Rotterdam North, but there's a bunch of other small artist initiatives around here, initiatives that do something with technology or trying to figure out how to get themselves off of fascist tech. We've been talking because everybody is experiencing the same problem. We're not able to find community anymore. We're also not able to connect with an audience anymore because all your posts and all your information gets drowned. We did that in January, where we decided to make a Mastodon account and a Blue Sky account. Some people followed, but not everyone, and it only created more hassle for us because now suddenly we have to keep up 3 social media platforms instead of 1. So there is also this fatigue with the audience, but also with organizations as they don't have the resources to keep up with so many new things and try new things out. So we've been talking about, is there a way that we can use existing things? That's why you see the newsletter is getting popular again. A lot of people talking about the newsletter because that's something everyone already has email. So can you make use of something that is already there? And we have, I think about 3 weeks ago, we've created a Signal group for Rotterdam North, all the artist initiatives here in the North, to kind of like post events on there. And within 48 hours, we have more than 100 subscribers. So I do think this convenience factor is very important. And it's not so much about people being lazy. I think there's already so much going on because there's so much content on these platforms and it's just continuing endlessly. And then, of course, you have your friends, your family, your colleagues, your email, your news, your whatever, and then also another endless stream of content you subscribe to. I think that makes people anxious. I think people are kind of tired of subscribing to another stream.
Yeah, fatigue is real. I feel it myself a lot. Oh, another thing I need to install to talk to one person. I think there's a lot of interesting projects, apps and services, but a lot of people have this mix of app fatigue. The convenience of being able to just like, I want to have it a bit in the app I already have. I do also know people have talked about newsletters, and I see it myself that I tend to enjoy getting a newsletter.
Me
And
too.
I guess if you have a Mastodon account, then you also have a bit of one server you're on. How has this been experience of setting up accounts on Mastodon and like Blue Sky? Like in a practical aspect, do you feel like you could promote your events through that, or it's more of a way of general communication to a wide audience?
Right now, we are communicating our events on all our social media platforms, a newsletter, a Signal group, and a website. And we're just trying to make do, figuring it out as we go. Luckily, we are 8 people, so we kind of like do a little estafette with the newsletter and social media. We're currently also building a new website with a built-in RSS feed in a way that maybe if we post events on our website, it can automatically get uploaded on our social media channel. So that is something we're working on to automate it. But honestly, setting up a Mastodon account and a Blue Sky account was a somewhat difficult process, very confusing. It never really appealed to me. Maybe it's because they named it after an extinct elephant. It's really the least sexy social media you can think of. You do not get any hot influencers on Mastodon. And this ideology of like having it decentralized is also very interesting to discuss because it is a topic of discussion. I was researching this entire thing, what I said about Set by Design. I was researching that in 21 in the midst of COVID. That was my big project. And my big question was, why are we not leaving Instagram? That was also after the 2018 Cambridge Analytica scandal about how Facebook meddled with the elections of Brexit. And then also Donald Trump got elected as president for the first time. I already knew about alternatives and I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I get people on Signal? Signal already existed. Mastodon exists for more than 10 years already, I believe. It's difficult. I never really looked into Mastodon. I felt like, what if I can get people that in the two convenient things that will be interesting already? So I got some people to Signal. But then in January, this January, when Donald Trump got president for the second time, and this inauguration with the fascist Sieg Heil by Elon Musk, and all the social media CEOs are on the first row of this inauguration, that really made people, I think the button switched in their heads. And this, so moving to Mastodon, moving to Signal, moving to Blue Sky suddenly took off. So that was our call with Zip to figure out, okay, so how can we use this momentum for good? And we made our own account and we tried to explain to people in easy language why it's important to move away. We wrote a newsletter. I wrote it with Ginevra and Sophie about the anti-discriminatory policies that were being removed from the Meta platforms and how it was almost actively promoted to use discriminatory language in any way, and how we feel like this is not part of our identity anymore. So it is really important that we move away from this company. So that was that. So we explained it in easy language and how it's become discriminatory platform with these new policies, and also how it's very opportunistic. And then we tried moving to Mastodon. And there were a bunch of articles from different kind of journalists that were written around that time that were all saying something else about the Fediverse. And I think that already gives an idea as how confusing the Fediverse is and how confusing decentralized media is. And then people are constantly saying, oh, it's like email. This is all apparently not true. That's what we figured out when we were making our Mastodon account and trying to go on PixelFed, but it works intrinsically different. In my quest to explain it to my mom, for example, the concept of decentralized social media, the concept first, and the concept of this interoperability of being able to connect, that's what we wrote in this newsletter. And that really held. We saw it going around in this tiny newsletter being forwarded to many people. And I still believe it's the only piece of writing that actually explains what the fuck everything is. We got a lot of followers on our Mastodon account in those following weeks. And then after that, they kind of died out again. That was also to be expected, I guess. And there we are again with this fatigue, because people make an account, they're happy, they post sometimes, and they realize, oh yeah, it's kind of crappy actually. And I do believe Mastodon is actually kind of crappy. And it's too difficult to understand. But it is interesting in the philosophy, but then in actually Blue Sky is a much more interesting example. I think that a lot of people are kind of against that for different reasons, and they're all legit reasons, because all the content that is generated on all the Blue Sky servers, they all go through some sort of centralized server. So that means that the people at Blue Sky can still decide what's happening on that platform and whatnot, and they can curate it in a way. But it makes it a lot more easy. People just go to the Blue Sky website and make an account, and you're on Blue Sky. So they understand this concept of a platform. You go to a website with your account. This idea of a million Mastodon websites doesn't click with people. And I think it's really difficult to explain it. And then also the design of the framework doesn't make it easier in any way.
Yeah, it's the classic situation that there are people who are really technical knowledge see things like easier than it is, than to someone who's now at this stage, like years, but people are just used to be able to go online via sign-up process in an app. It kind of just works. People might say that that's sad, but I think that's the reality of a lot of people, that just like normal people who aren't really super technical or have a deep passion for that kind of topic. Also, if you look back, the topic of privacy was way more in people's minds before. And I'm not saying that it's not the people mind now, but I feel like it's somehow shifted. Before it was really about the privacy of the apps, Cambridge Analytica, a lot of writing, I remember, like around that time, like 2010. And now it's more like the political aspects of where the service is hosted, or should you go to Signal or Telegram? It's kind of battle between which app should you go for, which one is more safe. Platform is safe, and then suddenly it's not safe anymore. Then you go to a new platform again. So it's maybe a bit of a whack-a-mole about which one to migrate to. What's your observation? You also, a lot of your work and your practices about the topic of privacy. So I guess you have a bit of like feeling of when you started your projects now, and then looking back at them, what do you feel it's changed?
I think it was about privacy, but always from a very human perspective. I started researching the entirety of the topic in 2014. I was still doing my bachelor's graphic design in The Hague, and I was very much fascinated by censorship, by propaganda. And that is, of course, very much related to graphic design, because you add a tiny little thing to an image, or you remove a tiny little thing from an image, and the whole interpretation of the image changes. And this really fascinated me, how much power you have as a designer to change someone's worldview. And I think around that time, it was 2012, that Eli Pariser wrote the book, The Filter Bubble. It was called The Filter Bubble, where so that was 2010, that was at the height of the Arab Spring. And he asked two friends to Google the word Egypt. One friend got all the news about the Arab Spring and about like politics, and got a lot of news search results. The other friend only got results for vacation in Egypt and cute little sunny destinations. I think Pariser was the first one that really, with like a very tangible example, showed to the world, like, this is what is happening. We are like, our worldviews are being curated. I mean, for whatever reason, for Google it was a reason for money, of course, because they sell ads and they want to curate the content for ads. That became my graduation research topic, because the way that digital information filters work, that goes in a much bigger quantity, it goes much faster, it's almost automated, and it's almost invisible. With propaganda, you can point out when propaganda is happening. Same with censorship, and especially visible censorship. For example, a black bar in front of, I don't know, some boobies. So you know something is deliberately taken away from an image. But here you don't know when it's happening, because your experience is completely personal and individual. So for me, that was the most interesting part of it. This you don't know when it's happening. You have this black box idea. You don't know when it's happening, and you don't know when your worldview is being changed deliberately or not deliberately. So my graduation project was called the Consulate of Google. It was quite literally a desk where you could have your passport issued with your Google advertising profile. People would come in, they would give their phone to us, and we would look up. At that time, you could look into your Google Ads settings profile. This was 10 years ago. And Google would automatically list these categories of interest for your profile based on what you've Googled, what you do on YouTube, and whatever. I would have topics such as Amsterdam, cats, video games, whatever. And we would all type them out by hand and then have real passport printed. The printer was going continuously behind this desk, folded, of course, stamps in it, invisible stamps even. And then we would give you your passport. The only problem was that the letters are all so small that you couldn't read them with the naked eye. And that was like, if you really want to know what is happening or what these companies are doing with your data, you really have to put some effort into it. Luckily, we had a tiny digital microscope next to our desk, so you could actually put your passport on a digital microscope and see on the big screen what your ad profile was. And they were listed in the passport as if they were visas, and your access to this topic of information. For me, there is this fascination. So it is about privacy, yes, in very technological sense, but it's more about this human consequence that it has. Like, how are we changing our lifestyles because of that? How are we looking at the world differently because of privacy breaches? Obsessed with privacy in a way that we call for a right to privacy, but this entire definition of privacy is completely different from person to person. After that, I did my master's at Sandberg, and that became my new research topic because the definition of privacy is already kind of like non-existent. We have some sort of base rights, of course. We have things written in law books, but they're not human definitions. They're kind of like, oh yeah, we need some sort of baseline to be able to adhere to the law or be able to enforce the law on people. Where it actually came from or how it's evolving right now in this day and age is very human. It's also important when we talk about privacy that we don't really look at the law or the technology, but look at the humans. So my second graduation work was about trying to understand this definition of privacy and how it changes from people to people. And I came up with a casino called the Black Box Bellagio, where you don't play with money, but you play with your data instead. For me, it was really interesting because it struck two topics. It started with a poker table. That was my first play test and my first tryout, because I was reading The Black Box Society at that time by Frank Pascal about how things get more hidden. So how data is being extracted and how it's being used, that is all in a black box. And these black boxes, they're very important. It reminded me of playing poker. You get two cards and you hold them secrets. And then, of course, in the middle of the table, some new cards appear, and combination of your hand in combination with the cards on the table, you have to make the best combination. And then there's a bluffing and the betting that comes in between. So before you know what the cards of your opponents are, you have to make a decision. Am I doing well or am I not doing well? And you completely base this on some loose statistics, clues you find on people's faces, maybe just the general vibe. Based on a hunch, you decide whether you want to continue with the game or not. And then in the end, you get the result. The cards are being opened. And this, for me, is kind of like the same thing with starting an account on social media. You make this risk assessment for yourself beforehand without actually knowing the facts, because they're all hidden away in black boxes. You kind of have to make some random decisions, some random suggestions about, like, maybe it's ethical, maybe it's not, we don't know, maybe it's disappearing in a few years. Let's just go for it. That was what was addressed in the casino, but then also what I really like about group games, especially with poker, you're with 10 people around the table, is that suddenly these curated experiences all become social. And then suddenly you start this conversation about privacy at the table with 9 other strangers. you notice that everyone's concept, definition, and boundaries regarding privacy are completely different. With this poker game, you were allowed to cheat. For example, you switch your cards with the cards of your opponent, or maybe you want a card in the middle of the table to be something else. Sure, I'll allow it, but in exchange for that, you had to show something on your phone and had this kind of like wheel of fortune you had to spin, and then the thing would say whether you had to show your latest 5 pictures or your most recent notes or even your bank account balance. It was all there. So there was another risk assessment where you could really see that suddenly, some people really don't give a crap about showing their bank account balance to other people, and other people are really swept away by it and are very flustered by it. I thought it was interesting to have this installation where the performance itself is about discussing the definition of privacy, and that's what happened in the casino. I think that's my take on privacy. It's such a loose hyper object, like a non-concept. Everyone talks about privacy, but everyone has different goals within that.
I think it's also a bit like how I've seen the discussion online. It's kind of based on US focus on what privacy is. In Europe, it's more like a legislation. Of course, then they forget that it's like individual differences of privacy in life. And then some people don't mind having all the windows open at home, and some people want to cover them at home because that's how private they are with a public. And so there's an analogy between the physical world of how people want private at home, but also online.
I think a lot of the friction with these social media companies happen because of the different definition of privacy, because these social media companies are either American or Chinese. I think it's a really good idea that we suddenly have a European privacy law now, the GDPR, for example, and that there is now a call for sovereign technology in a way that it's closer to our culture, because culturally we have formed some sort of definition of privacy, and it's vastly different from the definition of people in Chinese culture or American culture. And I think this friction also happened because lawmakers have allowed Meta and all the social media by Meta, Twitter, for example, to do whatever they want. And I think if these companies were within European boundaries, then maybe European lawmakers would have put a stop to it already at an earlier stage.
Another project comes to mind, like you've been working on a bit of a project about doorbells.
Smart doorbells.
And I also feel like, because there's also like the products and kind of the mission of them, it also comes from another idea about privacy, like what's allowed. You bump into the reality of there's actually laws in cities and countries what you're allowed to film in public or not. Some countries you cannot show any faces in the photo. Other places that's allowed because it's public space, and the notion of a public space is also different.
This is, it's really a great follow-up, really great connection, because indeed the smart doorbell, I've been researching the smart doorbell for a year now. It's a really interesting topic because especially in the Netherlands, it's extremely popular. 1 in 5 households have a smart doorbell. That is, I believe, 1.5 million smart doorbells in the Netherlands. I researched it. I made a publication about this. Publication is completely online on someoneisatyourfrontdoor.com, referring to the notification people get when someone rings the smart doorbell. This smart doorbell indeed is another American invention. It has a really funny history, actually, because the smart doorbell was introduced in 2013 on Shark Tank as Doorbot. It was called Doorbot in the beginning. And there was this guy that was presenting it as, you can now see who's in front of your door. And the sharks, the investors, didn't understand the concept whatsoever. So there was no deal made during the show. But 5 years later, Amazon bought the company for $1.5 billion. And Doorbot became Ring. And Ring is by far the most popular smart doorbell. So Ring especially commercialized the product, made advertising around safety aspects, because in the United States, when you order a package, it is put on your front porch. The package can stay out for a long time. And so you have this concept of porch pirates, people that come up and steal your package. So this smart doorbell was a huge success. Amazon, being, I believe, the biggest web shop of the United States, now also offers protection methods for those packages you've ordered from that same web shop. Yeah.
So it's a bit like they create a problem, then they also create the solution for their own problem.
Yeah. And so this concept of privacy didn't really come up in the beginning because people in the United States have very large front porches and front yards. So when you film with a smart doorbell, you just see your own land. I believe 90% of the United States is just land. And then here in the Netherlands, the streetscape is a lot different because you have these little front doors in the streets. Here in my own street, I count at least 10 smart doorbells. And the interesting thing about the smart doorbell is it records video and audio when you ring the doorbell, but also when you pass by. So all these doorbells are constantly recording and saving the footage to the clouds, Amazon's clouds in this case. Or Google's clouds. Nest is owned by Google. That's the follow-up. And then there's also Eufy. Eufy is owned by a Chinese company called Anker. The introduction of this smart doorbell was very successful in the United States because privacy wasn't as big of a problem. As the more popular the product got, the more kind of like strange privacy issues came up from that. And it wasn't so much about people being angry that their house 5 kilometers away was being filmed, but the fact that package delivery drivers were filmed without their consent. Maybe they did something funny, they farted or they fell down and tripped. These were posted on social media suddenly. You also have this problem that you have this neighborhood also, by the way, owned by Amazon. The app Neighbors comes along with the smart doorbell, and it's kind of like a neighborhood watch app where you can post suspicious figures, ask questions about, did anyone hear this loud noise at 3 a.m.? Things like that. And then also here, of course, the images of people are being posted without consent, and it's usually people of marginalized communities, people of color. So that is absolutely creating friction, but these problems are kind of like different again than in the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, it's very interesting because the Dutch love gadgets. So this is also a great gadget because it's very easy to install. People get it for free along with their energy contract here. The Dutch police noticed how useful the footage was because most of these doorbells are filming the streetscape. And now here it gets interesting because this is what the product does. It comes straight from the United States. The only thing that's been changed is the voltage system. But we have privacy laws in the Netherlands. One of them is you're not allowed to film the public roads. You're only allowed to film your own possessions, such as your front yard or your garage, for example. You are not allowed to share footage of people without their consent. So we have these laws, but they're not being enforced. Even worse, the police actually loves these videos because filming the public road, escape cars are being filmed, criminals running away are being filmed, and the police has been able to solve a lot of crimes with footage from people's smart doorbells. Illegal footage. When you look at it from that perspective, it's actually illegally filmed.
The law to solve another crime.
Yeah, the police gave them away for free. In return, you had to register your smart doorbell in the police camera system. So whenever the police needs your footage, they have kind of like a fast connection with you. That it's like you don't have to go through all the legal stuff, etc. And then I think, it was earlier this year in February on Dutch Radio 1, the police actually said people should all buy a smart doorbell. So that went completely the wrong way with all the privacy watchdogs we have here in this country. But this is the current situation, so it's friction. And one can wonder, why is no one enforcing the law? But one can also wonder, is maybe our definition of privacy old-fashioned? And does the law need to be changed?
I know a similar issue in Norway, for example. Norway has a lot of tax rebates for buying electric cars. When they introduced this, I was thinking about smaller city cars and now Teslas or whatever. So there's a lot of Teslas around, and then the police is getting footage from Teslas because they are also filming all the time. So yeah, it's an interesting thing for probably another podcast about law and privacy. That's sadly not that one, but
Yeah.
maybe future guests I can bring in about talking about the privacy and the law. It's really interesting projects and how the internet culture is seeping into real life. I have a feeling sometimes that this discussion about the internet and physical space is still separated sometimes, but it's all merging together. It's not like physical life and digital life, it's all intertwined at the moment.
The hybrid life.
Hybrid life. Did you feel that? Or you see like as a topic of discussion? Because I think like if you go back a few years, it was all about online social media accounts and privacy now. Maybe it's just my personal view, but what do you feel about that?
I think maybe I've always seen it as a structural part of life. But maybe because internet for me is part of infrastructure, but also because at a very young age I connected with real life people that I met up with. The internet bleeding into my real life, or the internet giving me the things that I need again for my real life. For example, learning how to code or meeting friends. There has always been this hybridity. It's never really been two different worlds for me. It's always been intertwined in my life. I think it's maybe hybrid in a different way. All these realms you carry with you are constantly with you. These realms get more in quantity. And this is especially a smartphone problem, not so much an internet problem. You carry all these realms with you the whole time. First, it was just your social media. Your friends are coming with you to work, for example. And suddenly your work comes with you to your friends' birthday parties because it's on your phone, your emails, LinkedIn, what your child does at school, the grades your child gets, they're all pushed to your phone. So your child's school life, you carry it with you to your friend's birthday party and to your office. And then your car is fully electric and gives you a notification when it needs to be charged. So you also carry the life of your car with you to your children's school, to your office, to your birthday party. And then now with the smart doorbell, you also carry your front door with you. It becomes more and more. And that, I think, also makes people stressed out a lot because while you're at work, you're dealing with your child, your friends, your front door, your car, and probably also your pet with the GPS tracker is hungry for some reason. Suddenly your mind needs to be in 10 different realms at the same time. And I think there, it's not so much about hybridity, but about being in all these different worlds. When you're working and you have a job where you have to be on the internet, you are with your job and also on the internet. When you connect with your friends, you can do that out in the street, but you can also do it on the internet. But it's kind of like a different realm. And now all these things are merging together. So I think there the hybridity is happening that is stressful for a lot of people.
There was this article I read, anything we say in this podcast that's referenced, I will put it in the show notes somewhere. A lot of people started working from home more widespread when COVID hit. A lot of people enjoy working from home. I enjoy working from home. But one element I kind of miss from going to an office or workspace is physical transition between home and work and from work to home. I feel there's probably some research on this topic, because of COVID.
I do know about that there's people talking about the third space, that the third space is disappearing. So after your home and your work, there's a need and a desire for the third space.
Like in the UK, they have this widespread death of the pub culture.
Yeah.
And there they do talk actively like the pub is the third space. That's where you meet friends outside work and home. And of course, that can be different from different places in the world. It could be a football pitch or anywhere else. But maybe we need a third space digitally also.
That's a great idea. I do think that it's probably within this topic of being able to transition to different worlds, and that is very important for your brain. I fully agree with you with the going on a train and going to a different place so you can do different things. And this third space, sometimes my work blends in with my third space. And that is actually not healthy because you need to separate your work from your free life and your free time.
I think a lot of people might recognize this. You go down the rabbit hole online to suddenly, I want to know about the development of trees.
You see YouTube videos.
Yeah. I remember before online, you would link chains and jump from place to space. And before wild website. And that is something people maybe miss with online, because now online is a bit of a funnel where you end up to like a YouTube rabbit hole, and then before you know, your entire YouTube feed is insert topic here, you know. It's like I'm gonna go on an adventure. Like if you're on city, you would just like, and that's my philosophy. Like if I go in a city, I tend to pick a spot, and then everything that happens between me getting there, that's just what happens.
Yeah.
You know, like the French city walker who would, you know, walk through the city, and I
Yeah.
do, you know, to just walk through online to random places. I think it's kind of fun.
That's a great connection.
The digital flaneur.
Yeah.
So maybe this could be like an end of the podcast that encourage people to go on beaten tracks online and find those weird places that you never thought of, or rediscovering old places like, oh, this site's still up.
Click on that YouTube video.
I've appreciated taking your time to talk. This is the first episode, so if it's a bit rough in the edge when you listen to this, it's just what it is. The internet is a bit rough and not that polished, even though many people would maybe say otherwise.
Exactly. The mastodon of podcasts.